I say impatient because invariably I start too soon and I end up with these leggy things that I can't put in the ground because Vermont weather isn't cooperating. But I can't stand not getting those little creatures going. Today, we have an expert for us in the world of the business of those seeds. What are they about? How do they get to us? And what are they doing? And so let me introduce you to Paul Feenan. He's a neighbor of ours in Richmond, and he's also a very important person at Mowing Organic Seed Company, one of the proud companies of Vermont that I think really is one of those groups that's just doing the right thing at the right time. And you may well know that vegetable gardening is seeing a lot of interest through this virus story that we're all addressing, and Paul's discussion, I'm sure, is going to touch on what that means to the business of growing in general, what it means specifically to High Mowing, and even more specifically, Paul's responsibilities in that institution. So without any further ado, Paul, you've got the floor.
Thank you very much, and thanks for joining. Yep, my name is Paul Feenan, and I'm going to start my screen here. So my name is Paul Feenan, and I live right down below the schools in Richmond. I'm a Bennington boy originally, and I spent some time up in the Burlington area as a young man, and then kind of up around these neck of the woods back in the late 80s, and then in the early 90s, I headed out west, and I attended college in the Pacific Northwest on the peninsula of Washington State. And I found a career after getting done with college there in horticulture and agriculture education. Mostly, I started out in the high school sector, but I also taught a little bit in the community college ranks as an adjunct faculty member, and that was really fun to kind of spread out. And then when I left teaching high school after about a decade, I went to Washington State University, and I was I took about a 2-year stint as the master composter manager of Thurston County, Washington, which was a very big volunteer master gardener program. I'm sure there might be some master gardeners in the group here today, but so that was great. Managed volunteers in the classes, and also the demonstration gardens they had in Thurston County. They had 5 demonstration gardens, so it was a great learning experience for me. It was a great opportunity for me to teach in a more community-based way rather than in a classroom setting. In 2011, my wife, Kirsten Workman, who is an agronomist with UVM Extension, and our 2 kids, who at the time were little wee things, we moved back to Vermont, and I sort of helped develop the food and farm program at the VYCC, and I was there until late in 2018, and in 2019, I took a job with High Mowing as a commercial grower sales rep. And so basically what I do is I work with mostly farmers, but also organizations. And I also work, I answer the phones and take a lot of calls and take orders from home gardeners as well. But my primary purpose at High Mowing is to work with with commercial growers in New England and Michigan and Wisconsin. And for the first year and a half that I was with the company, I also had Eastern Canada. But we recently hired a Canadian sales rep to handle all of north of the border. So I work with about 1,800 clients, and on their operations, and kind of meeting their seed needs, but also offering technical advice. So that all said, I um, I wanted to. We decided, kind of after last year, that we did want to tell the story of what happens behind the scenes or leading up to the seeds getting to your house in those wonderful envelopes that you get this time of year. Because I think we all sort of have a vague knowledge. And, I had farmed and taught for years and years and years. And I had a vague knowledge, but I had no idea what went in to getting those seeds to to us as growers. So, I thought we'd spend, a little bit of time today going over that. I'm going to set my timer here so I don't go over, so that we have plenty of time for questions. But so yes, High Mowing, Jack mentioned, is a proud Vermont company. It really is an amazing Vermont story. A fella named Tom Stearns. He's in the lower row of this picture of our staff. Everybody can see my screen, I hope. If not, Jack, you'll let me know. But Tom is he's watering the greenhouse there in the lower right hand corner. And he was a young fellow with a dream. And his dream was first about producing seeds, and then quickly became producing organic seeds, which at the time was really unthinkable. Like it just wasn't done. And even as organic farming, vegetable farming has grown and grown and grown as a sector, it's safe to say that up until about, I'd say, 10 years ago, uh, the vast majority of the farms that grew with organic practices sourced their seeds from farms that grew those seeds without using organic practices. And you know what? That was fine. And it still is fine that growers find varieties that way. But Tom had this idea that, well, now wait a second. If this is what we're all about, if we're about, growing vegetables in an organic way, shouldn't there be a way for us to produce those seeds organically? And he even had a deeper idea, which was, isn't this another opportunity for organic vegetable farmers throughout the country to add another enterprise to their business by growing organic seeds in addition to organic vegetables? And he set about doing that. Like I said, he started in 1996. We are based in Wolcott, Vermont, the booming metropolis of Wolcott, Vermont. And as I've said, all of our seeds are certified organic and non-GMO project verified. And it's worth just taking a second and talking about that non-GMO thing, because there really isn't GMOs in vegetable crops as it is. So sometimes that non-GMO piece can be a little bit confusing. But the reason why it's important is that there are crops that are what we call, sort of high risk crops when it comes to GMOs. And you can imagine what crops they are. They're the crops where there's been a lot of GMO production already. Things like corn and beans, soybeans, and beets in the sugar beet industry. And so when we say we're non-GMO project verified, we take every one of those lots from those sort of those particular crops, and we send them out for GMO marker, the fact that they don't have them, so to sort of verify that they're non-GMO. So that's just a little clarification on the GMO piece. But all of our seeds are certified organic, and we're really the only company that is 100% organic. We have many great, collaborators and competitors Johnny Seeds, Fedco Seeds, Osborne Seeds out west, Harris, Territorial Seeds. Many of these companies that I just mentioned do have organic selections, but they also have conventional selections as well. And I'm a customer of all those companies, so I really believe in their work. But high mowing is different and a little unique in the sense that no seed that we sell is not certified organic. So we have a beautiful catalog. If you haven't gotten it, you can let me know or let somebody here know, and they can let me know. We'd love to get you a catalog. We have 700 varieties in it, and 55 employees, which is a pretty big deal during COVID. That number has gone up substantially. And we feel really proud about that we've offered, with this increased demand that we've seen, that we've offered a lot of really, really good jobs to folks in that neck of the woods where there's just not a lot of jobs. So that's a place where I really do pay a lot of homage to Mr. Stearns and the rest of the management at High Mowing. I'm a firm believer in job development, and man, it's really amazing to think, it's a small company, but it makes a pretty big splash in the Northeast Kingdom. So I'm really proud of that. Okay, so goals for the presentation are as follows. I just kind of want to go through sort of the life cycle of a seed, and I put that in parentheses because it's not really the life cycle. That life continues to go on long past the time that we ship it out the door to you. But it's really that flow of seed from the inception of the new variety to your mailbox or your garden or your propagation bench. Talk a little bit about the challenges of organic seed production, and a lot of times we get into those challenges as we get into a question-answer period, because people have questions like, well, why can't I find this one variety of beet? And then I can explain why you can't find that one selection of beet, because maybe one of the parent lines is hard to grow organically, or one of the parent lines is really valued in the conventional market, and those breeders have decided to push all that stock seed into conventional productions, which is an important decision. And so consequently, we don't have that variety organically. We'll talk a little bit about what our process is to address some of these challenges, and how you are considered throughout the organic variety development, and then answer any questions that you might have. So here's a who's who of organic seed. It's more of a, sort of a little bit of a flow chart. And the next slide has it's a little bit simpler and a little bit easier to see. But you can see here that, in the center of the screen is me. What I'm representing, High Mowing, and all the arrows that feed into it are how we get seed. So breeders. Public breeders, mostly those are like university faculty, but it could be some other type of public held entity that is breeding vegetables. We have big breeders that are really multinational corporations. Many of them are still family businesses, but Bejo and Enzazaden, which is the organic arm of Enzazaden, is called Vitalis. These are companies that are based in the Netherlands and are selling and growing seed all over the world. And they have employees all over the world. They're very important companies for us and partners. Seed growers, whether they be the breeders themselves or farmers that the breeders are contracting with, or they might be our growers, our contract growers, and they might be our customers that that have decided to take on seed production as, again, one of their business model, one of their business enterprises. And so those all feed in to us, and then we have a process by which we choose and bring those seeds in, and then run them through quality control, so that when they get out to you, or they get out to farmers, or they get out to other retail seed companies, that then sell to you or farmers, that they're of super high quality. Here's just another way to look at that, but it's a little bit more of a flow diagram. There's those breeders. There's the phrase indigenous seed keepers. Those are from some of our old heirloom varieties and open pollinated varieties. They could be backyard gardeners. It doesn't necessarily mean Native Americans, but just the phrase indigenous, meaning that they're that they've had those seeds for a while, and they're growing those seeds like in their homes or in their places. And so then those varieties, we source our variety ideas from them, and then we run them through our trials. And then if there's any licensing that needs to happen, and there's a big conversation happening right now in the seed world about intellectual property. It's always been a conversation, but it's been a little bit louder lately, and it's a great conversation, and we welcome the conversation, and we're really transparent about about some of our seeds, and patenting the patents that the breeders have, and so on and so forth. And then there's seed production. And then once we get the finished seed from the grower or from the breeder, then we run it through a quality control process. And each seed has its own quality control step. You might not be surprised, but you might not know that every pea that you get, pea seed that you get from High Mowing, has been frozen for 10 days. To kill any insects that are in there, mostly pea weevils, and especially in the organic sector, that happens. And so we freeze those seeds, and of course it doesn't damage them, and then we run them through our germination test after that. Then, of course, once the seeds are released for sale, then we have to go through a packing and then our sales piece, and it's what we call fulfillment. And then, of course, it gets to you. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there are a lot of people in every seed house throughout the country that are going to work every day. I'm working from home. Many people have that benefit to be working from home, and that's been wonderful that the companies have been able to adjust that way, so that we've been able to continue to answer the phones and work with growers and move seed through the system. But there's also people who are putting seeds in packs, and they have been going to work since March of 2020, and we're really super thankful for those folks. And they've done a really amazing job of keeping seed moving. Okay, so real quick, just to make sure we're on the same page, because this question always comes up. It's not really part of this talk, but it's this difference between open pollinated and heirloom and hybrid varieties. We could have a similar screen here for all of the different intellectual property topics that are out there: utility patents, plant variety patents, all these types of things. I don't have that screen because it's a lecture all into itself, but it's just I thought that it'd be worth to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So there's, generally speaking, two general categories of plants in our catalog. They're either open pollinated varieties, which are varieties that are, and this is important distinction, it's not like they're just willy-nilly out there in nature. There's been a lot of selecting and breeding that have happened for those open pollinated varieties. But the difference between open pollinated varieties and hybrids are that open pollinated varieties, when bred back to a plant of the same variety, will stay true to type, and the seeds will be available to you pretty pretty much the way that you want them. Now you have to have some isolations, and you have to make sure that you're not breeding them across to another cultivar or variety, because if you do, then you have a hybrid, so to speak. Um, uh, but before we get to hybrid, an heirloom variety is sort of a named variety that would be an open pollinated. So all heirloom varieties are open pollinated, but not all open pollinated are heirlooms. And these are really informal. The word heirloom is a really informal taxonomic word. Who defines what an heirloom is? I've seen all sorts of definitions out there. I don't have one, but it's a variety that has been selected and curated. I like that word, by someone, so that it has kept its characteristics for them, and so then therefore is a named variety. So Brandywine tomato is a named variety. Nootka Rose garlic is sort of an heirloom, named garlic. So hybrids are when you have two open pollinated lines, and you'll often hear the word inbred here. I don't like that word very much when it comes to this breeding piece, because it's not really that they're in. I mean, it is that they're inbred. I mean, they're inbred in the same sense that a German Shepherd, a purebred German Shepherd, is inbred, right? But it's not. It's not like a familial thing. It's more that it's bred back to its same variety or same species in the case of the German Shepherd. But so a butternut squash is bred back into and with only butternut squash of the same name or variety, and furthermore, those lines are really carefully curated so that each parent line are they have all of the characteristics that breeder is looking for, and really no other. So in that sense, they are a little inbred or pure because they've rogued out all of the other characteristics that they don't want to share. And then the last step is when they take those two open pollinated varieties and they breed them together, and crossbreed them, and they come up with a hybrid F1 variety. And that variety will not be true to seed. And that variety has some real benefits to it, and based on what the breeder was looking for. The breeder might have been breeding for disease resistance, and so one of the parent lines might have exhibited really strong, downy mildew resistance in basil, for instance, or something like that. Those hybrids are often very uniform. So I think of broccoli, and I think of a 200-foot row of broccoli for a farmer, and an open pollinated broccoli might have heads that come on over maybe a 2-week period, and that's okay. It's certainly okay in the garden. I want that actually in my garden. I don't want all the broccoli to come on at once. I like the idea of being able to go out every few days and find a new mature head of broccoli. But a farmer's looking to go out and fill a box, fill a bin, meet the expectation of a CSA clientele, and they're looking for all those broccoli heads to mature really within a few day period, or as soon as they as short a window as they can. So uniformity is, and all be about the same weight and size. That's what's nice about hybrids, is that they show a lot of uniformity. And then they usually have increased yield and vigor, and that's because of that scientific term of heterosis, which is, when you do, a cross of two different varieties, you end up with something that's a little bit stronger than most of the parents, or either of the parents. The benefits of open pollinated are, of course, that you get to save the seed, or I can save the seed. The seed company can save the seed, and so therefore it's less costly because there's just less lineage that goes into that. Often open pollinated varieties are bred with a little bit better flavor, but that is changing, and a lot of the hybrid varieties are being really carefully chosen with one of those character traits as flavor in there. That wasn't always the case, over the last 50 years, but I think over the last 10 or 15 years that is a little bit more of the case. And you're still reaping the benefits of lots of selection and breeding, which I've already alluded to. So variety origins, we kind of went through this already. We have heirlooms that are stewarded by indigenous seed keepers and farmers. There's an example of our flint corn. Public or independent breeders, land-grant universities, and those are researchers that are really after to solve a certain problem. Those have been really huge for us the last 10, 15 years, especially around disease resistance. And that's been really, really great work. But also private companies have been doing that, and associations. Breeder producers, these are those big companies that I talked to you about. And then participatory plant breeding programs or partnerships between breeders and growers. And those are really picking up a lot of steam and throughout the country and throughout the hemisphere. In particular, in Eastern Canada, there's a lot of that going on. So there's a lot of really cool, partnerships going on. Once we have a seed, once we've kind of decided on which varieties we're interested in, we put them to trial. And excuse me, that's my Audubon clock. It's going to go off for a little while. So our trials are we don't put anything in the catalog until we've trialed it at least 2 years, and most of them 3, and many of them more and more than that. And so Trial Farm is up in Hyde Park, really close to really close to Wolcott. It's the old Apple Cheek Dairy up there, and Tom bought that farm a long time, about 5 years ago now, I think. And so we trial all of our vegetables there, and we also have some on-farm trials. And so these are the questions we're looking to answer. What are growers looking for? Let's go back to that broccoli. I'm looking for a broccoli that'll grow through the summer, that I can put in my CSA boxes, not just in the spring, not just in the fall, but we're looking for a really good heat tolerant broccoli that is really uniform and comes off the plant pretty in a short harvest window. Okay, we go out there and we ask breeders what they're working on there. We may even tell those breeders that that's what we're looking for, and then it's the tail wagging the dog, so to speak, a little bit. But oftentimes we'll go and we'll see what breeders and these other folks have out there, and see if any of those fit the bill. Many of those may be in the conventional field, and we then have to convince those partners that there's a market for them in the organic sector. And sometimes that can be a challenge. Sometimes it's impossible for whatever reason. There are some restricted breeding techniques that breeders use that are disallowed, or they're under review and not allowed until the review is finished for the organic standards. And so in some cases, there are some things that we would really love to have, but we just can't have because maybe something is happening with that breeding process that's not a traditional breeding technique, but that might be considered genetic modification. Once you start getting in there and start playing with cytoplasm and these types of things, it's kind of off limits to the organic sector. And so in some cases, I'm really candid with my growers that if they want that particular type of broccoli or that particular type of whatever the case may be, that they're probably looking to source that seed from a conventional retail house. And that's a good conversation to have because we want our growers to be happy. Okay, what are our partners saying is promising? What are we missing? Like, what are those things in our catalog that are just really blind spots? We're always looking to fill those. And then, ultimately, is it a product that's not super costly to produce? A story that comes to mind there is our corn selection, which is we have 3 corns, one called Allure, one called Enchantment, one called Mirage. They all came out of a partnership with Seneca Seeds, which is a Western New York family-owned seed company that had never even heard of organic seed breeding before they met Tom And over about a 10 or 15 year period, Tom really developed a strong partnership with Tim, who now owns the company, one of the sons of the original, the owner when Tom first started talking to them. And they decided to choose 3 varieties that they trialed in an organic setting. And they found these 3 varieties that worked really well. And man, they do really well for us. But it turns out, after years and years of trying to produce the seed, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, that the male parent line of that hybrid corn is just really crappy in an organic setting. And we cannot get it to grow and chit, which is aligned with the female corn plant, to produce lots of good viable seed. So the cost of seed production is really high on that corn, even though we love that corn. Now, Tim at Seneca gets away with it because he's able to use treated corn seed that has a fungicide on it, and that enables that seed to germinate in a little cooler soil temperatures than the seed if it's not treated. And of course, we can't treat it because then the seed wouldn't be certified organic. So we're going to work with Tim to see if there's a better male line that will produce a corn, a hybrid F1 selection that has the same characteristics that we like. And that's been a 15 now going on. That'll be a 20-year partnership between 2 seed companies. Very exciting. 2 seed companies that really, if you looked at the industry, in a competitive way or in a different kind of way, you might think we were diametrically opposed. One's a conventional, seed company, one's an organic seed company, but it turns out that we have a lot of similar goals. So, and then here's some things that we're looking at when it comes to our trials. We're obviously looking for taste and fruit quality, or quality of the vegetation, if it's a lettuce or a carrot or something along those lines. We're looking for disease resistances and how one variety might be better or worse than another when it comes to disease resistance. We're looking for post-harvest storability and shelf life for our farmers out there. It's a little bit more of a farm factor than it is. We recently brought on a new bok choy called Bopac, and we all took one of those home and put it in the crisper for a month to see how it would look, because we wanted that data. And so so we were looking at it from a home gardener standpoint as well, but mostly looking at that from a farm standpoint about how long it will last in the cooler. And then, other features like plant habit, how easy it is to harvest, things like that. Some of our squashes, we're looking for a really open habit, so that you can reach in there and get that summer squash or that zucchini. You can find it easy. And then, of course, we have one summer squash that is actually spineless called Smooth Operator. Everybody's probably experienced that little rash on your arm you get when you go after, a summer squash or zucchini. And Brent Loy, who recently just passed away, was a plant breeder at University of New Hampshire, and he worked with us and also Johnny Seed to produce a line of spineless summer squash and zucchini, and you can find those out there in the seed catalogs. One's Smooth Operator we have, and there's a couple of zucchinis out of the Johnny's catalog. I can't remember what the name is, but where you can go in there and it's sort of an ouchless or a rashless picking endeavor. So I think I'll pause there. I think we've got a few more slides, but I really do think that we'll maybe pick this part of the presentation up next week there. I think I'm gonna stop sharing so I can kind of see, and then I'm willing to answer some questions. There's already some questions that have been generated, but we'll get to all the questions between this week and next week. So maybe I'd love to start with any questions, and there may not be any, that's okay. any questions that maybe got generated by that that presentation. Oh yeah, that's one. Can I use last year's seeds? That one came through. But does anybody? I'll answer that one in a sec. But does anybody have any questions about um, about about any of the information in the presentation? Any words I used, or any questions that you thought about? Let's see. I got to get my.
Yes, Paul, I have a question for you about organic produce. Does it have to be grown from organic seeds, or is it just how it's raised?
It's just how it's raised. Um, but that's changing. So certifiers throughout the country have different rules about the different amounts or percentages or reasons that a farm can or cannot source organic seeds. So for instance, a farm may choose an organic variety. Bolero carrot is a great one. Bolero carrot is a variety that's bred by Bejo. That's one of our breeders, but it's only bred conventionally, and it only is available conventionally, and it is just a great carrot. I would venture to guess that 90% of the carrots that you buy locally from local farmers are Bolero carrots. You can buy Bolero carrot if there's no Bolero carrot option in the organic world. And you might say, well, there's another carrot that's really a lot like it. Well, that doesn't matter. Like a farmer gets to make that decision. This is sort of a business decision. So you may do that. But other certifiers are saying that farms need to source a percentage of their seed by dollar figure that are organic. And so those rules are changing and evolving every year. But an organic farm may use conventional seeds. They may not use treated seed. So the seeds that you get that are dusted with, some of them are dusted with actual paint or dye. Cabbage seeds and onion seeds are often a little silver in nature, but anything that's like bright pink or bright green, that's been treated with a fungicide, probably Captan, and that's not a certified organic seed. And organic farmers may not use those seeds.
Great, thank you.
How about I jump to, can I use last year's seeds? You can use last year's seeds. I use last year's seeds, and we sell last year's seeds. I would use last year's seeds from Mowing before I use last year's seeds from me in my closet behind me, because Mowing is storing those seeds in a bulk cooler at just the right temperature and just the right humidity, and all of our seeds are subject to cycle germ. So we know that beet seeds need to be cycled every 3 to 4 months, and so we're cycle germing those all the time to make sure, and we're really keeping close records on how those seeds are performing in germ tests. Some seeds last longer than others in your home closet, and many people have held on to tomato seeds for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and they do well, and they sort of eventually just tank. And that's one of the things you'll notice is that germination percentages will kind of stay here 80%, 80%, 80%, and they might go to 76, and then they go to zero. And so that's one thing you need to be prepared for. Some varieties of seeds last longer than others, and a really quick Google search on seed viability or lifespan of a seed of different seeds will give you those things. The ones to be most careful about are onions and all the betas, like beets and chard, maybe even spinach. Those ones are subject to losing their vigor, their germination. They die quicker than others. Did that answer the question? How is the end result different between GMO and hybrid? Um, a hybrid again is just the simple idea of crossbreeding two open pollinated plants naturally. Male pollen from this plant to the female ovum of this plant. So a squash, a squash, let's say a butternut squash over here that we know is somehow doesn't get powdery mildew. I'm making this up, but let's just go with it. This squash seed, I notice, I keep growing it and I keep collecting the seeds from it, and I rogue out all the ones that do get powdery mildew, and I have this line of butternut squash that doesn't get powdery mildew, but the fruit tastes like nothing. And this is the sweetest butternut squash I've ever had. And I crossed those two by taking the male pollen from the disease-resistant plant selection and crossing it with the female flower of the other squash plant. And so really nothing unnatural has happened other than the pollinator is me. And I mean, some other somewhat unnatural things go. We go through and we denude all the male flowers off the female line so it can't produce its own pollen. So we send people out in the field every morning before the flowers open up, and they cut off they emasculate that female part of the field. So I mean, I don't know if you want to call that unnatural, but GMO is when you're getting into the genetics of the plant. So for instance, broccoli, as I mentioned, all of the brassica families, they have this this inability to cross with themselves, and it's a male sterility thing, and it happens in nature. But not all varieties are male sterile, which means that the female can sometimes be pollinated by the males in its own stand. And we don't want that. We want to cross it with another male. And so what they actually do is before they plant those seeds out in the lab, they go into the cytoplasm of those female plants and they sterilize those seeds so that they can't produce any male pollen. And that is considered genetic modification by, well, the European Union, not by the United States yet, but so the organic certification standards have not allowed that. So different practices, and it's somewhat nuanced, but genetic modification is when you're actually getting in to the genetic molecular structure of the plant, as opposed to just breeding two distinct varieties to create that hybrid. That did it. That made everybody shut down. That's enough to, man, if I was teaching a high school class, that would have been the end of it. They'd all taken off. And I wouldn't have blamed them. Jack, throw some more questions at me.
Here's a question for you. What's the difference between determinate and indeterminate around tomato choices?
Determinate tomatoes and indeterminate tomatoes. So the difference is basically that determinate, the synonym would be bush type, and indeterminate would be vining type. So and the reason for that is on a determinate tomato, every growth point ends in a flower cluster. And so the growth point is finite. It ends because it ends with a cluster of flowers. And so you want many, many branches. And so you want it to turn into a big bush because you want as many tomatoes as you want. And you might even imagine that the fruiting window on determinates is a little shorter than indeterminates. bush tomatoes, and it's true, doesn't mean they all come on at once. Some varieties do that are bred that way. Indeterminate tomatoes, the flower cluster comes off of the stem. And so the stem grows up and a flower cluster goes off of it and the stem continues to grow. And so then that one, you want less stems on it. And so those are often pruned and those are often trellised a little bit more aggressively. Bush tomatoes can be grown on the ground or they can be grown like in cages or things like that. Growing an indeterminate variety in cages can oftentimes become a little bit of a mess because they just become this huge bramble of a vining plant, and they'll go up the top and they'll fall over. So those are the ones you often see staked with taller stakes or maybe even V, like pruned into a V on a trellis. I grow both. What else you got? Hey, I got a question for you guys. Does anybody know the origin of the name High Mowing? I'm looking at Rod because I kind of feel like Rod might have been aware of the phrase mowing back in the day. Anybody know where the name High Mowing even comes from?
Nope.
A mowing back in the day when the settlers first came over to Vermont and New England, and it's really a New England phrase. You don't hear it anywhere else in the country that I know of. A mowing was a meadow. A mowing was a field. And so people would refer to mowings as, a noun. And it was the back mowing or the river mowing or, Feenan's mowing or whatever. And so Tom really liked that idea of a high mowing, of this idea of a mountaintop meadow. And so I just thought maybe I was worth sharing. Someone asked, what's a cosmonaut Volkov indeterminate? Technically, we call that, what do we call that? We have some fancy name for that. It's like semi-determinate. That's what we call it. It ends in flower clusters, but it has a tendency to throw more length on those stems. I treat cosmonaut Volkov like an indeterminate. I trellis it rather than cage it, but I let it have more stems. So I might let it have 3 to 5 stems that I trellis up, and I use strings to trellis my stems. I kind of wrap the vines around the string. So most of them I let have 2, maybe 3. Cosmonaut Volkov and a couple others I let have 3 to 5. What's your next question, Jack? You got there?
How about what are some common mistakes from your vantage point that gardeners make? New gardeners, old gardeners. What are some of the mistakes that come your way that seem obvious to you?
I'll answer it a little tongue in cheek. My wife always tells me when it comes to cover crops, she always says, "Well, it won't grow in the bag." Because like if I didn't get my cover crop out there and I left it in the barn and I'm complaining that it's too late, I'll ask her, she's an agronomist, and I'll say, well, is it too late to plant that cover crop? And she'll say, well, it's not going to grow in the bag. So, not seeding it, not trying, not throwing some seeds out there could be a real mistake. I think that most times in the home gardening sector, I see people a little afraid of fertility, and they just don't put the fertilizer to it. I think especially when you're starting a garden out, or if a garden hasn't really had a lot of attention paid to the soil biology, which is hard to do in a garden setting. with mulching and composting and manure and these types of things, that the idea of not adding some fertility, vegetables are bred to be pretty heavy feeders. And so don't be afraid to go get some blended fertilizer. Again, I choose organic fertilizer. I like the North Country products that you can get it just about anywhere around here. But any kind of fertility that's out there, conventional or organic, don't be afraid about that. You have to follow the directions so you don't burn your plants and things like that. But that's pretty rare, especially if you use a product that's designed for starting or for side dressing, and you do it right. So I think that's a mistake. I think a lack of succession planting is a mistake that I see in the home gardener sector, where people, they kind of, that's how my grandpa did it back in the day. It was all in, all out. And I think that there's that the idea of moving of moving crops out and planting again, and having enough beds that you can have multiple plantings of things is the way to go.
How about companion plants? Would you like to talk about companion plants?
I would. I'm not an expert in it, but I do it. I had a great experiment this summer here where I companion planted on either side of my potatoes. And I had never done that before. I mostly have grown potatoes in large, 1 acre plots. I've grown a lot of potatoes at once. And this, I had two 50-foot rows. That's a lot of potatoes. But and I knew they grew slow. I planted them late, Father's Day. And so the day that I planted them, I did a little bit of a trial where for a third of that stretch, I planted beets on either side of them, or beans on either side of them, bush beans, or I planted bush beans on one side of them, or I planted nothing on either side of them. And I didn't see any difference. And I got harvestable beets and bush beans, that was even cooler, by interplanting. I plant beets. I transplant beets on the north side of my tomatoes. And I'm able to kind of just let those grow all summer and just sort of, harvest those out, whenever I need them. That works really well. I plant lettuce everywhere. I plant lettuce as an understory crop everywhere. I also have, bed blocks of lettuce, but I plant lettuce just about everywhere. I plant cilantro everywhere. And if it goes, it goes. If it goes to seed, oftentimes it will bolt. If we got a lot of hot weather right after I planted it. And so for that reason, I've always got transplants to go in, or I'm always scattering seeds around. I plant basil on the front side of my tomatoes, and I get great basil production there. Again, I plant some basil in the greenhouse. I plant some basil in, a block in my garden, and then I plant them, interspersed. And I think that's maybe a mistake too, is not planting things in different places and sort of putting all your chips on one number. That's not always a great idea in gardening. So I'll plant my basil in 3, maybe even 4 different locations.
I got a question. What do you, from your vantage point, as the seeds are going out from your distribution center, what are some of the underrated vegetables for home gardeners? Things that you think ought to be great out there, but nobody seems to know it.
I don't know if nobody seems to know it, but I've alluded a couple times to lettuce. I am pretty convinced that we eat a lot of salad. we love a good salad. And this time of year, I don't have any grown in the garden. I'm buying those boxes of really expensive, Olivia's or whatever the brand is. They're $6 for 11 ounces. If you do the math on that, if we eat once a week, we're spending about $300 a year just on those boxed greens. And I can save that money down to zero from May 15th until I'd like to think Christmas, the way I garden, which is with a greenhouse and with a lot of cold frames and clochets and things like that. And through like never ending successions of salad greens and lettuces. So I personally think that's key. I understand, people want to grow cucumbers and tomatoes, and if you've got the space to do that, go for it. But I really love salad greens and cooking greens. We plant a lot of choys and Chinese cabbages and things like that, and spinaches. So, go ahead.
Paul, I think on that fine note, I'm going to suggest we're at 2:30. Let's wrap it up, and I will make a point of going through all the questions that people send in. So if you've got more questions from today, if you'd like to, with your questions, redirect what we talk about next week, please send that information along, and we'll try to be good to everybody's needs. Until next week, it's not too soon. You could start to be thinking about your starts if you haven't already. Put some onions in, eh? Have a great week, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye now. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks.
Thank you.